Welcome to Season 4 of FBC Seminole's The Table podcast. This season is called Tell a Good Story. Storytelling is a natural part of human life, and we all do it in one way or another. But the most important story any of us tell is the one we tell ourselves. This series will help you train your inner narrator to align the dialogue in your head with the truth of God's story and His Word. Come break through the negative stories of our modern world and infuse the peace, patience, joy, and gratitude of life in Christ back into your own story. So pull up a seat and join us at the table.
All right, guys. Well, hey, welcome back to the table. It's been a while since we've been here together,
Yeah,
it feels like.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Since the spring, wasn't it?
I think so. I remember doing some of these over Christmas, and then those got released through the spring. But I don't know that we've been together in a long time, it feels like. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's
Wow.
I think you're right. Well, welcome back. Let's take a minute and just everybody just say who you are. I'm Tanner, and I've been here for 10 years now, and wear a lot of hats at the church, just in a lay role, and have really enjoyed kind of facilitating some of our podcast discussions. But go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I'm Sean Decker. I'm the worship pastor here, and I've been here since 2010. So we just had our 14th year this summer. Yeah, then I kind of do some technology stuff at the church, or I don't know, build things at the church, whatever.
Yeah. Jack of all trades.
Something like that, or
Cool.
master of none, and that whole saying.
I wasn't going to finish
Well.
it. Go ahead, Ryan.
I'm Ryan Froze, and I think we've been here 7 or 8 years now, somewhere around there, at the church. And I'm a deacon here, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah. And
Kendall Froze, Ryan's wife.
all right.
Same.
Same story.
Same.
All right. Well, welcome to our podcast series called Tell a Good Story. And boy, I am probably as excited for this series as any series that we've ever done, just because of how personal it is to me, how much it's meant to me, and how much I think I've been transformed through this journey in my own life. And I want to kick us off just by telling a story. So, anybody who lives in Seminole knows about the dreaded 6-way stop. I don't even have to tell you where it is. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Highway 214, so you got a major highway, then you've got 11th Street, which is another major road in Seminole, and then, Northwest Avenue F, which is the only road on the northwest side that doesn't have stop signs. So you've got these 3 major arteries of Seminole traffic, if you will.
It's a good way to put it.
And which does not equate to Dallas traffic, but the thing is, in the morning time, if you have a kid who goes to school at the junior high, or if you work at the junior high, or there's no way to get there to that school without going through that intersection, it feels like. So you've got oil field truck traffic, you've got the families of 600 different students trying to get in and out. I mean, it's crazy at 7:45 in the morning on a weekday in that intersection.
Yeah.
And it's a 6-way stop sign, right? Which is all because you got to pay attention to who pulls up first, and you've got to count 1, 2, 3, right? To see how many cars are going, and inevitably, every time you get to that intersection, go ahead. What happens?
The person that's supposed to go doesn't go.
That's right. And then somebody who's not supposed to go does go. Or how about, have you ever been there where somebody's in a big hurry, and somebody goes and the person right behind them just runs through the stop sign and just follows right behind them? And I can already feel some of your blood a little bit boiling, right, when that happens. What's your normal reaction in that moment?
I don't know, the people always honk at me whenever I go with them.
When you hop in behind
He's the person that
You're the guy
you're
who goes. Yeah. I have seen some gestures in that intersection. Boy, I've heard some horns honked. Yeah. And the other day, I'm headed to the junior high to start the school day. And of course, it's a busy morning, busy intersection. 3 different cars go, and somebody decides they're more important than everybody else, or whatever you want to say about it, and just zips through the intersection out of order out of turn. And there was a time in my life when that would have made me so furious. Yeah. I probably would have honked. I would have screamed something, maybe not rolled down my window and screamed. I would have done everything I could to make eye contact with the person, right? To let them know how upset I was. And I would have said something along the lines of, how people are so selfish, or something like people are so dumb, or I can't believe these morons who think they're better than everybody. How come they can't wait their turn? Can you not count to 5? Something like that. But the other day this happened to me. And as the person sped out into the intersection, I caught myself concerned for the person. And I said to myself, oh my goodness, I hope everything is okay for them. If they're in that big of a hurry that they would risk speeding through this dangerous intersection, there must be something going on that they feel like is important enough to risk their safety. So first of all, I hope that that person's okay. And then I looked around at everybody else at the intersection. It wasn't my turn to go yet. It was, a car two places over. And nobody went. Everybody was paying attention. And as this person sped through the intersection, which could have and probably should have caused an accident, right? Everybody was paying attention. And almost just without thinking, as I sat at that stop sign, I said, wow, how awesome is it that everybody at this intersection was paying attention and that nobody got hurt, even though that person messed up and went out of order. I hope everything's okay for them, but golly, people are awesome. Look how cool everybody did. And I drove to that intersection almost giving everyone a round of applause that, we had done such a great job or whatever. And as I got to work that day and I was getting out of my truck, it kind of hit me wow, that didn't even make me mad. In fact, I was super positive about that situation. And it struck me because that's not natural for me. And it's not normal for me to be that positive, especially about an event where I feel like I'm probably justified, right, to get angry. But one of the phrases that I used, people are awesome, led me into my job, which works with people, right? Hundreds and hundreds of people every day that I come in contact with. And as I walked in to the junior high to work with a group of 28th grade boys, I realized that had I gone through that intersection saying people are morons or people are selfish, as I went in to do my job with people, I would have come in expecting selfish or moronic behavior from the people that I'm walking into. But going through that intersection saying people are awesome and pointing out all of the good things that people did in that moment, as I walked in to do my job, I found myself excited to see people and to do my job. And it was just such a small shift in my mindset, in the way that I saw the events that were taking place, right? And so I just wanted to, for a moment, ask you, do you have can you relate to that story at all? And if so, maybe can you relate to this idea of, the way that we interpret the events that happen to us really then goes on to determine how we live our lives past that point. And so if you can relate to that at all, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I can relate to the whole traffic part going to school very well because I've got 2 kids at junior high right now, and we kind of know, if we leave after a certain time, it's going to be horrible.
Yeah.
But then I also find myself, and I've been catching myself lately, but I find myself when I leave the junior high, I'll take another road that's not the same road as everybody else.
Yeah.
And when I get to the next intersection, I look to see where the next car is at that point, And this is, and then I'm like, and I go to see if I beat him at the next road. And then I've caught myself, I don't have any kids. I've already dropped them off at school. And so I'm like, what are you doing?
Who am I racing?
Yeah, do they know? Like, does this guy one street over and, or the mom in the Suburban know that I'm trying to beat her to the intersection?
Yeah.
And so I've kind of caught myself, and this may not be related other than the traffic thing, but I've caught myself that I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
And so I've slowed down, and Amber, my wife, can attest to that. Like, traffic bothers me, and other drivers bother me.
Yeah.
And I'm the guy hollering moron before,
Yeah.
when people don't do things as perfectly as I do on the road, it really annoys me.
Yeah.
But I like that mindset, though. I mean, whether or not, who knows what their situation was.
Right.
And that's not really the point, right? The point is your outlook and changing your reaction and changing the way you view the world.
Yeah.
And it changed the rest of your day because of it.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I'm sorry do you guys, okay, and so this series is not about me being happier and changing my day, although I hope that's a great outcome, and I hope that happens. I hope you have a better day and you have better days because you have a better mindset. But it not only changed my day, who else's day did it change because I chose to be positive in that moment? As I go in now to do my job with a room full of teenage boys, let's just play the two scenarios out. Let's say I walk in with the mindset of people are selfish, people are stupid, and God, can you believe that guy did that? And I walk in now, and one of my 8th grade boys walks in 2 minutes late. What are the odds that I handle that interaction with grace and compassion? I'd say pretty low. You ever been there? I know we all have kids, right? And you probably have done it to your own kids more often than any, yeah?
Yeah.
And then keep going. What happens next?
It ruins their day.
Yeah, I was going to say it ruins their day.
Yeah, I now have, and I'm a little bit different about this, but I now have 2 kids that if something goes wrong in the morning, their whole day's ruined. And it's like you can't snap them out of it. It's weird. Because I've always been, I guess it's just because of the way that I was raised, I was never allowed to do that. Something goes wrong, you just deal with it and then you move on. But like one of them we're dealing with, especially my middle son, because he is like that. If something goes wrong, when he wakes up within the first 5 minutes, the rest of the day is bad.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's usually me.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've done this year is I get up like 2.5 hours earlier than everybody else. So then I'm prepared for when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and hang on to that because we're going to get to that early time and that time of preparation as we move through the series. But let's just continue that story out with that kid, or maybe your own kid, and you have that really negative moment that's something totally out of your control. You have no control over that guy behind his steering wheel across the intersection from you. He speeds through. You have a moment of anger, an outburst. That carries over into your very next interaction, whether that's your own kid, somebody at work. All of a sudden now you've damaged that relationship. For the next, it might take you two weeks to rebuild the trust now that you've lost. And it all stems from what you thought about in that moment when somebody did something that you didn't like, right? And now you've set yourself back for 2 weeks. On the other hand, like we said, this is not about making us happier, although I do think that God wants us to be happy. I think God cares, and if you disagree with that, just ask yourself, do you want your kids to be happy? I think the answer is yes. I don't want my kids to be happy all the time, especially when they do dumb stuff. I want them to learn, but I do want my kids to be fulfilled in their lives. And I think God, if He's a good father, He wants us to be fulfilled in our lives. And so I do think it's biblical to lean in and to move to places that bring us fulfillment and bring us happiness. Holy happiness and happiness of the Holy Spirit, joy of the Holy Spirit. But all of a sudden now, my interaction, if I choose to look at how awesome people are, my interaction in the very next moment with those kids is going to be, when that kid shows up 2 minutes late, is probably going to say something like, "Hey man, I'm glad you made it on time," or not on time. "I'm glad you made it.
Yeah.
I was getting worried about you. Is everything okay?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much different now of a day are we going to have, or of a relationship are we going to build? Because I didn't berate the kid for being there 2 minutes late. And guess what? It's a junior high kid. He can't drive himself to school, right? It's not even his fault that he's late. His mom, something was,
Yeah.
He's got a little brother who, whatever. And so now I'm not going to yell at him for something that's out of his control. And we're going to move forward. And what are the odds now that I'm going to be an influential and positive person in this kid's life, that could, a relationship that could realistically shape and change the trajectory of his life, right? So it's not just about making ourselves happy. It's about living for Jesus and making an impact on the world that we live in through having a positive or hopeful mindset, right? And so that's kind of the idea, or the mission of our series here is it's called Tell a Good Story. And what that means is we all have a narrator that lives inside of our own heads, right? In fact, we're constantly talking to ourselves. Most people think it's weird to talk to themselves. I actually think you're weird if you don't talk to yourself, right? You're in the huge minority. Everybody talks to themselves pretty much all of the time. What story is that narrator telling you? What story are you telling yourself? What's the conversation with you that you're having? What's that conversation like, right? And are you telling a good story?
It's good.
Are you telling a good story? And so that's the direction I want us to head. I got a few more quotes and some thoughts here to wrap us up with this first session. But before we go there, I'm interested. What do you guys think, or maybe what are you hoping to gain as we move through this study and thinking about telling a good story and cultivating that hopeful attitude?
Everybody's looking at me, so I guess I'm supposed to talk.
Yeah, go.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't. That this is something that is very near and dear to me, because I think it's super important not to live your life reactionary. That you don't just react to the things that happen to you. There's a different purpose in your life. There's a greater purpose, and so just because something bad happens doesn't mean that I have to have a bad day. Just because something bad happens, it doesn't mean I have to tell myself a bad story.
That's right.
And I think it's an intentional thing. You were talking about your situation, talking about how just for some reason that day you decided to tell yourself a good story. I don't think it's like just a coincidence thing either. It's something intentional that you've been doing in your life that's bleeding over into it.
It's been years. It's taken me years to get to that point.
Yeah. And I think most people, if you think about most people on this earth, they just react, in my opinion, they just react to what happens to them. And I think too many people that deal with bad circumstances allow that to affect their life too much, because at the end of the day, like, you can't control your circumstances. The only thing you can control is like your reaction, what you tell yourself when stuff happens. And I think people don't think about that enough.
Yeah. Sean, what do you think about this topic?
So, I'm thinking about from a parent's viewpoint a lot in this. So our youngest is he's pretty hard on himself most of the time, and I think he tells himself kind of sometimes not such a good story, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes when things happen to us, like what you're talking about, we can think that we're being punished, or that it's happening to us, right? Like, why is God doing this to me, or whatever? And I don't think that's the case, right? It's if something happened that's out of your control, that doesn't mean you're being punished, or doesn't mean it's happening to you, right? And I think we do that. We internalize thinking, wow, this is happening to me. And we battle that in our house as far as our attitude and not letting things like that affect our whole day. Just an example, and I don't think Grayson listens to the podcast, so it's fine.
Okay.
He knows exactly what I'm talking about. So he's in band, and one morning, one of the first days after he got his saxophone from school, right, to bring it home.
That's cool. Saxophone is cool.
And
that's the coolest instrument.
It's pretty awesome. I played tuba, which I think is pretty cool.
That fits you.
Well, thanks.
But saxophone is cool.
So one of the first days, I was taking him to school, and I dropped both kids off, and Grayson gets out, and he's at the sidewalk, and I see him from behind, and like it's like this. He goes, he forgot it at home. I knew exactly in a split second. Obviously I didn't see it. I knew he forgot his saxophone, and so in his head, his day was ruined, totally ruined. And he was too far gone for me to say, "Hey, I'll go get it. It's fine." But in that moment, his day was ruined because of that circumstance, right? And we've had mornings where we're not all getting ready very quickly, or we're and it's chaotic. And so so when we get in the car to start the day, it's already super stressful, right? We're in a bad mood. We're grumpy. We're biting each other's heads off. Well, what kind of day are we going to have?
Sure.
Probably not good.
Right.
And I mean, long story short on that, we went home, and I think Amber ended up taking his saxophone to school, and everything was fine, But when I think about this, I think about him, and I think about other people that are in that same boat, that we typically, what we're telling ourselves is not always the best version of the story.
Yeah.
I think people. I typically try to be pretty positive and see. I'm like Amber. It drives her crazy because she says I'm butterflies and rainbows all the time. That no matter what it is, I try to look for how it could be, and that it's going to be okay. However, I do have road rage, and other drivers really. So it's kind of it's kind of a two-sided coin. But I think this is really pertinent because I think the story we tell ourselves in life a lot is maybe different than what's reality, or we think it's happening to us, and it's really not the case. It's not always about that.
Well, in the story we tell ourselves, even if it's not real or reality, it becomes the reality we live in.
Yeah.
And so whatever our story that we're telling is whether it's good or bad or right or wrong, that's the reality we're living in.
Yeah.
And so why is it so important that you tell a good story? So that you can live in a good reality, right? Because how are you going to be an effective minister for Jesus if you don't live in a good reality, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that having a positive mindset is going to make cancer go away. I'm not saying that being positive is going to make sure you never have a flat tire and be late for work again. We're not saying that we're trying to get rid of negative circumstances. In fact, we're talking about exactly the opposite, right? That in spite of negative circumstances, and even though these things happen to us, do we still believe that there's a good God who loves us, who's writing the story of our world in the right direction, that the end of the story is going to be good, and that's where we're headed. And that brings me to a really good point here, is that, and these first few sessions are going to be more of a theological basis for this series, right? But our positivity as followers of Jesus is not based on like self-help or a self-sufficient attitude, which is where it comes from. If you pick up a book off the shelf at Barnes & Noble, right, you're going to get the self-help, I'm enough, and that's not necessarily bad, and it's definitely not terrible, okay? In fact, I enjoy every now and then a good positive thinking, book or something like that. But as followers of Jesus, that shouldn't be the basis of our positivity, but it should come from trust that God is alive, active, in control, and that He will do what He said He would. Now, just think about that for a moment. If we trust that God is alive, that God is active in the world. We trust that he's in control, and we trust that he's going to do what he said. How does that not lead to positivity? And I think as Christians, we have a responsibility to be the most positive people on the planet, because we have the greatest reason to be. Yeah. We have a God who's alive, who's in charge of this world, and he's good. So how can we not be brimming, overflowing with joy? And I think that's the example we see in Scripture. But it's so easy to not be that way. And so I'm also not trying to beat anybody up if right now you're listening and you're like, well, that sounds great. Yeah, you're right, but that's not how I feel, I'll finish just with these thoughts and then let you guys close us out here if you want to. But I'm not, like I said at the beginning, this is really important to me because of the difference it's made in my life. And just to be totally honest, because I'm coming from a place where within the last 10 years, I've been on medication, because I can be so cynical and such a perfectionist and so hard on myself, that I was clinically depressed, and I have damaged relationships, and I've damaged myself from a negative attitude and a negative mindset. And a few years ago, I think God just pulls us whether we know it or not, he's pulling us where he wants us to go. And he gave me this phrase that became kind of my mantra for a whole year, which has kind of become my mantra for the last several years of my life. And that phrase was, I will be present and positive. And it was really good to me then. It's become everything to me now. And so I'm not coming from a place of, hey, I'm really good at this, let me tell you how to do it. This is coming from a place of, boy, I know what it's like to be negative and cynical and bitter. And now I know what it's like to be present and positive. And there's no comparison as to which one is better for me, which one is better for my family, my wife, my kids, my house, for my school, my job, for the people that I work with, for the world that I live in. There's no question which one of those things is better, which direction is better, right? And so I do believe that this is something we can develop, we can grow. I think this is something God can train us in, and that we can train ourselves as we lean into him and lean into his word. And I think that it makes a difference, and it helps us make an impact. I've got a quote to finish us up here, but any final thoughts as we launch ourselves into this series of telling a good story and thinking about our thinking about our mindset? Anything that just comes to mind, or kind of those kickstart ideas you guys want to toss around here?
I was going to say that I'm more prone to tell myself a bad story. And I think that's something I've realized in the last few years, but realizing how far it goes back, not just, and how you're raised, how all of that plays into it. But the last few years, trying to tell a different story, but realizing that, like, hey, when something bad goes wrong, it's really hard to, like, shift, trying to not go there to the, negative Nancy place, but to come back. So that's something that,
Yeah. I don't think you're alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably how do you guys feel? Do you feel like most people, if we would generalize for a second, do you think most people are generally hopeful and optimistic, or, cynical and pessimistic? What do you think?
I think most people are generally pessimistic.
Yeah.
I mean, bad news sells, right? I don't know if it's just something that's innately within all of us. Mm-hmm. If it's something that everybody just has to battle, but it does seem like most people are more pessimistic.
Well, it becomes a habit, it doesn't, you might not even mean to be, it's just there. It's the pathway that's there, and you have to retrain it.
It's the path of least resistance many times, isn't it? Yeah. It is. It's an easy path to walk down. And you're not alone if you're walking
Yeah.
down that path, right? Like
absolutely.
you're not a terrible person, and you're not wrong, but there's a better way.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there, I mean, that's kind of like our natural bent is that direction, right? And I think it's something that you have to practice, and you can probably attest to that. Like
Yeah.
it's not something you just do. It's something that it takes time, and there will be times when you don't do it so well, and times when you do succeed.
That's a great point.
So I'll say this and I'll give it back to you. But we, Amber and April are teaching a class on Wednesdays called Unoffendable.
Yeah.
And this is kind of right at that same alley, really. And it talks about practicing forgiveness, and practicing not letting, and we talk about a lot of things we've talked about already, practicing not letting people affect who you're going to be or how your day is going to go, or circumstances or situations.
Sure.
And it doesn't change your circumstance. It doesn't change what happened that morning, or it doesn't change the way they talk to you or whatever, but it changed the way that you, like Ryan said, changed the way you reacted to it.
That's right.
And so I think but it's something that we have to put into practice, or we're not going to be any good at it, because our natural tendency is to go the other way, to think that's, on the more cynical side or the more negative side, or that's where we, I think, naturally go.
And so 2 quotes and a question to finish us up. 2 quotes from 2 different preachers. The first is Charles Swindoll, who says, "I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes." Love that quote.
It's good.
The second one I just heard is from a preacher named Robert Madu, and he said this a couple weeks ago in a sermon. It says, "The battle is rarely about the external confrontation, but always about the internal conversation." It's a cool little play on words, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's rarely about the external confrontation, but always about the internal conversation.
That's good.
And so my question is, so how do we get started? How do we start telling a good story? And I'm glad you asked, because that's going to be the topic of our next session. So we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys, for being here.
It's good.
Thanks for listening to FBC Seminoles, The Table Podcast. A new episode will be released each Monday. We invite you to pull up a chair and join our table each week as we dig into God's Word together. We would love for you to join one of our Connect groups that meets throughout the week and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. If you'd like more information, you can call our church office at 432-758-3291 or visit our website at fbcseminole.org.